as Orthodox Christians, we are called to be representatives of Christ and to love people unconditionally. And the more we're able to do that, the more people experience God's unconditional love.
What's its history?
Well, it's been around for quite some time, but it had kind of died away for a bit and came back to life in about 2010. We actually started meeting in 2005, I believe it was. I was still a prison chaplain at the time and received permission from the warden to be on the board of OCPM. And we started making plans to bring it back to life. And after I retired in 2010, then I was able to come on board and be part of the staff. It is an agency of the Assembly of Bishops, and as such, we serve all of Orthodoxy. It's a very pan-Orthodox ministry. Our goal is plain and simple, just to bring the love and the light of Jesus Christ to people in prison. Men and women in prison live in a very dark world, and we feel it's a mandate from the Lord. In Matthew 25, when he separates the sheep from the goats, he lists 6 things that we need to be doing as Christians to be his sheep. And one of those is, I was in prison and you visited me. And it's usually the one thing that most Orthodox Christians haven't done. And so this ministry allows every Orthodox Christian to get involved and to be a part of visiting Christ in prison. And they can do it through both volunteering, either with the correspondence program or part of a prison team going into a prison, or just financially to help us send materials into prison libraries, to send our materials to men and women individually. And everything we have, we send for free to the prisons. And so when somebody gives a donation our direction, it goes towards that. And we're able to then meet the needs, spiritual needs of people in prison. And they're part of that. So they're answering that mandate from the Lord.
In particular, can you tell us more about what it means to correspond with a prisoner and how that process works?
Sure. Well, we have a correspondence department, and they correspond regularly with people in prison and write personal letters to them, not just the usual kind of things. And we also have, as part of that program, we have training that we put them through. We have correspondence studies. We have Orthodox study Bibles that we give out to the people in prison. In addition, though, we have a program where clergy and laity can get involved with writing someone in prison. And they need to go through our training manual. They have to get the blessing from their priest, and the priest has to agree to help supervise them. And the priest, their parish priest, would sign off on their being able to do this. And we have a lot of rules in place to help protect the people that join our program and write, because a lot of times, guys in prison can still play games and try and get over on it. And so we try to protect them from that by just asking them to obey our policies that we've set down. And so we have a training manual that we send out to that effect. And when people sign up, then we give them a person to write. And men write men and women write women in prison. And the reports we get back are just amazing, of how much they absolutely love this ministry of writing someone. Again, it's not for everybody. And, it does call for people to be committed to doing that work. It's not something you can say, oh, I've written a couple letters, I think I'll bag out, because people in prison have been let down countless times, and they don't need to be let down again. So it's something that we expect people to sign up for and to stay with that person as long as it's possible.
3, what are specific steps that one could take in a parish to work towards serving in some capacity ministering this way?
Well, I think it's important to realize, number one, that it is the constitutional right of someone in prison to be able to practice their religion. But on the outside, for us to go in, it's our privilege. It's not a right that we have. And so you just can't go up and knock on the prison door and say, I'm here to save souls. It doesn't work that way. And so the easiest way to get started in a prison ministry, if there's a man or woman in a prison nearby the parish uh, that is Orthodox, then that person in prison can request visits and services to be able to practice their faith. That usually opens the door the easiest way. If they don't know of anyone and there's a prison or jail nearby, then it's a little more complicated because they would need to contact the prison and or jail and offer their services. And I usually tell people to offer to assist the chaplain with the chaplain's ministry, because it really is the chaplain's ministry. He's there or she's there to provide for all the men or women in that prison. And so the chaplains have a responsibility to make sure that the religious rights of the whole population are taken care of. And so it doesn't matter what religion. When I was a chaplain, I had rabbis coming in, I had imams coming in, I had different folks coming in to be able to meet the needs of the population that we had in a particular prison. And so if they do call or write, the idea is that you're there to assist the chaplain in their ministry. One thing that Orthodox offers that perhaps other Christian groups wouldn't offer would be a knowledge of the history of Christianity. And so often chaplains, even when I was a chaplain, were swamped with a lot of Bible studies especially from Protestant groups. And we've got plenty of Bible studies. And if an Orthodox group say, hey, would like to come in and do a Bible study, the chaplain's probably going to go, oh, I need another Bible study. No, I don't. But if they say, hey, we'd like to, if you could use us, could we come in and teach like a history of early Christianity, maybe up to the Reformation, and be able to get their foot in the door that way and begin to teach a class. And when they do that, they find it very fruitful for their own ministry and the men in prison or the women in prison. It's an area that they've never gotten. They get lots of Bible, but they don't get a history of Christianity, and it's real helpful for them to understand what the history is. So that's a good way to do it. As far as in the parish, again, it goes back to what I said about even corresponding. It's not for everybody. I've had people walk in, and the first time the iron door slams or whatever behind them, it freaks them out, and they go, I can't do this, and that's understandable. But for those who feel called to it, and again with the blessing of the priest and the priest being active in it as well, then it's an opportunity to come in and when the door does open, to be able to do that with men and women, and a great ministry, a great opportunity.
Uh, yeah, talking about parameters and how to set boundaries and what kind of things people need to know in that regard.
Yeah, well, there's twofold. What we were just discussing was that, parameters, if someone were to come and live at your house, that somebody, it could be somebody that it could be a relative even, that's going through troubled times. I really believe you need to set parameters and stick to those parameters. In other words, if they come from a past of having done drugs and things, and you tell them when they come to the house, no drugs, do you agree to that? And they say yes. Then if they fall back into drugs, then, especially when you have a family, you can have a responsibility to keep them there, and you need to stick to that, because they can infect your whole family with just a spiraling downfall. So I think it's important to have those parameters. For our volunteers, whether it be in correspondence or volunteering directly in a prison, we have very strict parameters that we set for our volunteers. And the prison as well, every prison system has a different set of guidelines or parameters that they set. Rules that if you violate those rules, you will be dismissed as a volunteer. And, you know, over time, I mean, we've had priests dismissed from prison because sometimes some of my brother priests think that the rules don't necessarily apply to them, and then they find out in a prison setting they do. And so they do something not against the law, but against the rules of the prison, and they find themselves dismissed as a volunteer. Then we have a vacuum there where there was a priest going in, and now we have no priest, and so then we have to find somebody to go in and fill that slot. So it's important in prison ministry or any kind of work you're doing with someone that has any of these kind of issues that would be against the law, let's say, if they're on the outside, that we have these rules and things set in place, and that people understand that if they violate those, there will be consequences, and to stick firm to those. It's like raising children in some ways. You know, you can't just say, well, we have this rule, and if you violate that rule, you're going to, you know, no cookies for a week, and then they violate the rule. Well, if you give them cookies, then you just totally botched up the whole parenting scheme that you had. So.
5 regarding the transition of a relationship from one of correspondence to one of in the real world.
Well, I think it's important when people come out of prison. You know, many people today in prison are finding orthodoxy for the first time. It was like I was saying, if you start teaching an early church history class, people are going to suddenly go, wow, I didn't know that. And the next thing you know, they are studying orthodoxy, and then they become catechumens. Maybe they're baptized in prison. And then their prison sentence ends. They've never been in an Orthodox church on the outside. Others, you know, you could have your altar boy that's been an altar boy for 10 years, and then suddenly, boom, he gets something haywire. He goes off to prison. 5 years later, he's coming back home. And the church has decisions to make as to how they're going to handle this. And, you know, what we have found over the years is that people who come back to a community, to a family, have a much better chance of staying out of prison than those who come back and are rejected. And so we always encourage churches to do their best to embrace the people coming back and not make them feel like they're an ex-con or a felon, or, you know, but to make them feel like they're loved, they're welcome, and that the church is there to stand with them and to help them all they can. Obviously, we don't want games played, you know, somebody coming out of prison and using the church and taking advantage of things. And that's always a risk that you can run. But on the other hand, the rewards are so great. When you see a person come out of prison, so many success stories that I've had in ministry as a chaplain, where people have come out of prison and a church has embraced them, and then they go on to a successful life. They end up getting married and having children, and just a beautiful life. On the other hand, there's real negative stories that where people go out and they're rejected, and oftentimes they end up back with drugs, back with, I call them the homeboys, back doing what they did that led them to prison the first time. And those stories always end up, sadly, seeing them again in prison. So it's a lot. The priest needs to be very involved, especially at the beginning, and really, again, setting parameters of what's expected of a person coming out of prison, and, you know, helping them with, if a person's been in prison a long time, they've been institutionalized, they don't know how to do the basic things of life. Going to a supermarket can freak them out. Trying to find a place to live and pay bills, and they just need help with the ordinary things of life. And when we can help them as a church get organized and see how the system works now and how they go about living, and to help them maybe with finding a job, those are all things that are amazing for a person coming out of prison and can lead them on the path towards success.
How can the church help prisoners who come out back into the world dealing with the stigma of their past?
Well, I think Orthodoxy, much different than other Christian groups out there, we do not approach either salvation or our Christian life in any kind of legalistic kind of way of that, uh, you know, God is the judge and he's up there and he's going to fire lightning bolts or something. We never view it that way. God is love, and God loves the person, no matter how tarnished that image of God in them might have gotten over time. God loves them. And I think that's a big help in realizing that there is no sin that they could have committed that is too big for God to forgive. And I think the whole sacrament of confession that we have in Orthodoxy that allows a person regularly to come and have confession with a priest and to hear those prayers read over them. I've had so many people just weep as those prayers of absolution are read over them, that I think there's just great solace in that. You know, there's a peace that comes from confession that you just don't get anyplace else. So I think those are all helpful things. I think also having a community that embraces you, you know, helps you to understand that you know, you see God's love through other people, and you experience God's love through the way other Orthodox Christians love you. And as they love you, in spite of who you are, then you begin to realize that, wow, God really does love me, and He cares about me, and so it's a package deal, really. You know, as Orthodox Christians, we are called to be representatives of Christ and to love people unconditionally. And the more we're able to do that, the more people experience God's unconditional love in their lives.
Do you have any success stories that you could share?
Well, I think, you know, success stories, sometimes we think of success stories only being for men who get out of prison or women who get out of prison and then they go on to successful lives. But what came to mind when you asked the question was someone who's still in prison, who will die in prison, and yet their life totally turned around. This man, when he was just a young teenager, he shared with me that his mother took him to the bus station and said, I've got something in a locker in there. Would you take this key and go and get it for me? When he walked in, he unlocked the locker, and there was a backpack with a note from his mother saying, I can't take any more, you're on your own. And this was as a young teenager, and I mean, his life went into a spiral. He ended up, you know, committing crimes, in and out of juvenile detention homes, and then in and out of prison, and then finally the crimes got worse and worse, and he ended up eventually getting, you know, life without parole. If you can imagine a life like that, that then at some point along the line embraces the Orthodox faith and finds the forgiveness of God in his life, it totally transformed his life. It transformed him so much that eventually, you know, Metropolitan Isaiah of Denver thought so much of this young man that he actually conjured him a monastic because his prayer life was so amazing. In fact, Metropolitan Isaiah even said, you know, his prayer life put him to shame because he would be up praying around the clock. You know, whatever the Orthodox Church said, this is a time to pray, boom, he was doing it. And he continues to this day in that same light of praying and living a monastic life in prison. And I think he would be the first to say that, he experienced God's unconditional love, and it changed his whole life, took him out of that gang mentality in prison, and put him onto a whole other path in prison, where he has an opportunity not only to pray but to influence other men around him. And so, I would say his life is a success. His life is a tremendous success, even though legally he will die in prison one day. I think God looks on him and smiles and says, "Keep going. Well done. Well done. Keep going."